Good morning, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to the Daniel Saul Show here on YouTube on this beautiful Monday morning, as I will be getting ready to talk about college football in the last round before the national championship. Before this video starts, make sure you go like, turn on post notifications on as always, and comment. Let me know what you think about this video, and if you want to see more greatness and more amazing takes from me, make sure you go down in the description, check out the links to my socials such as X, TikTok, and Instagram, where you'll see highlights and clips from the show if you miss any action here on YouTube. Let's dive into the video. Okay, so Ohio State versus Oregon, right? So obviously that game wasn't as good as everybody thought it would be. It wasn't a back-and-forth game like people thought. The number one overall team ranked in the regular rankings and in the college football playoff rankings, number one, Oregon Ducks. Y'all got embarrassed, okay, in front of everyone. On live television, y'all got embarrassed. You know what that game was? It was a sign and it was a showing of Oregon getting exposed. Ohio State exposed the phony number one overall ranked team in the country. That's what that game was. And you know it's funny because a lot of people were hyping up Oregon so much this year, and that's where they ended up. I mean, Ohio State beat the brakes off of them. I mean, look at this. The first two quarters, Ohio State scored 14 and then 20. They scored 14 in the first quarter and then 20 in the second. They were dominant from start to finish. No matter if they didn't score that much in the second half, they were dominant, okay? They were straight up. The game was electrifying because Ohio State picked up the pace immediately. Right out the gate, they were going right at Oregon, right at them. And you know what? Oregon had nothing to say. They had no response in the game because at the end of the day, they were 20 points down when the final buzzer ended. When the game ended, they were 20 points down. They had no shot at coming back. So when you look at just the overall total yards, passing yards, rushing yards, and yards per play, Ohio State obviously beat them in every category. Okay? They had 500 total yards, 319 passing yards, 181 rushing yards, and 8.8 yards per play, which means they just dominated Oregon from every single statistical category you could possibly put up. They were dominant in that game. Oregon had nothing to do, and they had no right in this game. Ohio State was absolutely sensational. They showed out, and they balled out, and that was a game that I don't know if any team in the country could have been better than Ohio State on that night. I don't think there's any team in the country that could have beat Ohio State that night. However, they will be playing Texas. And if you look at Texas, okay, Texas had a very shaky game against Arizona State as they were dominant like Ohio State in the first quarter and scored 14 points, identical to Ohio State, like I just got done saying. And they looked like they were going to do exactly what Ohio State did to Oregon, but that didn't happen, right? After the first quarter, they kind of slowed down a little bit. They scored 3 in the second. And in the third quarter, same thing. They didn't really score much. It was a low-scoring game up until the fourth. Arizona State actually caught some heat, and they were dominant in the fourth quarter. They dominated Texas in the fourth quarter and made it a ball game and ended up going to overtime. They both scored 7 in overtime. Then they went to a double overtime. And then that's when it was decided. But the reality is, it shouldn't have even gotten there. Okay, Texas is way better than Arizona State. Okay, and Arizona State barely made it into the college football playoff, and Texas was ranked as the number one team in the rankings to begin the season, or in the first few weeks of the season. They were the number one team in the country, and they barely beat Arizona State. I mean, Arizona State's a good team, but they're not Texas. Texas was good at times, and at other times they weren't. So it's really hard to say. You know, if you look at it, they were, 2 of 2 for fourth down efficiency, which means they're good on fourth down. But Ohio State really didn't even have a fourth down at all. They didn't need to do anything on fourth down. They never They never got to a point where they needed to go forward on fourth down because they just made the bigger plays. Because in the Ohio State game versus Oregon, you can look at it, Oregon ran more plays, had the ball longer, had more third downs, more fourth downs, but Ohio State dominated them. You know why? It's because Ohio State made bigger plays. They had bigger plays when they needed it, and they executed, and Oregon didn't. And when you look at Texas, this game was more of a back-and-forth game towards the end, and Texas at the first quarter made bigger plays and made it look like it was going to be another one of those games where it was like, oh, well, this was a mismatch. No, it didn't end up being like that. And Texas showed their flaws. They showed why they, why they were in that position where it was a back and forth game towards the end. They put up a lot of penalties, and they put up 67 yards out of those penalties that they lost. Texas cannot do that against Ohio State. It just will not fly. It will not happen if they want to win the game. And if they want to win the game, they have to fix that. And Ohio State, I believe in this game, is going to dominate Texas. When you look at it, Texas is the 3rd overall defense, 17th overall offense, and 14th rush defense. And when you look at Ohio State's 1st in total defense, 27th offense, which is better than, or isn't better than Texas, and 5th overall rush defense. So when you look at it, they can rush better. Their rush defense is better than Texas. Their overall defense is better than Texas. And yes, Texas has a better offense, but their offense was not that great against Arizona State's defense for most of that game. So if Arizona State could lock down Texas at any point in time in that game, imagine what Ohio State is going to do. Ohio State dominated a good team, the number 1 ranked team in the nation, supposedly, from the rankings. Both college football playoff ranking and just the national ranking, they dominated Oregon from start to finish and exposed them. What do you think they're going to do to Texas? What do you think is going to happen to Texas? I don't think it's going to be close. I think this is going to be a blowout. It will be 42-10 at best. I think Ohio State is going to absolutely obliterate what is left of Texas, and we'll see Texas next year. For more clips and highlights of the Daniel Saul Show, make sure you go down in the description, check out the links to my socials, such as X, TikTok, and Instagram. Thanks a lot, guys.